Welcome to The Adaptive Mind, where we talk with experts about practical, effective approaches to breaking habits and changing behavior. I'm your host, Brady Dowling. I'm glad you're listening. After the episode, be sure to head over to theadaptivemind.com, where you'll find the full show notes and transcript from our discussion, as well as an episode cheat sheet. Each cheat sheet has the most important points, quotable moments, and specific actions you can take to implement the strategies we discuss. Head to theadaptivemind.com to access a cheat sheet for every episode. Thanks for joining for this episode on mindfulness, where we have Jaleel Mackey. This episode is the first in a series of episodes on mindfulness and meditation. In this episode, we'll focus on breathwork and meditation. And in following episodes, we'll talk and dig more into mindfulness. We'll talk about urge surfing, kind of the theory and academics behind that. Then also go into different experiences and kind of how it's applied in the real world. So I'm super excited for this episode with Jaleel. Had a really great time talking with him. He's very insightful, especially as he brings insights for performance. He really focuses on performance and mindfulness. And then of course also talks about kind of benefits in general. And anyway, I really enjoyed my conversation with Jaleel, and I hope you do too. Welcome to this episode of The Adaptive Mind. Today I have Jaleel Mackey, who is a sales leader and now a very successful and super helpful meditation and business coach. And we're going to be talking a lot about breath work and meditation. Jaleel, thanks for being on.
Yeah, I'm grateful to be here, brother. Thank you for the invitation. I'm excited to drop in and riff with you.
Yes, for sure. So to jump in, can you talk a little bit about how you got into breath work and meditation and just kind of how you got started with that?
Yeah, happy to. So my meditation journey started when I was about 17. I was a freshman in college, experiencing a lot of challenging emotions. I was overwhelmed. I later found out that I was navigating depression. But in that discomfort, I was seeking some kind of relief. And I actually experienced at least the qualities of meditation in a yoga class unintentionally. I had no idea. I was invited to a yoga class. I was dealing with some football injuries, and I wasn't a big fan of the yoga practice, at least at the time. Now I love yoga, but at the time I was like, yeah, this isn't for me. But the end of the practice, when I was lying in Shavasana, lying on my back and corpse pose, as it's called, I felt this incredible peace and this like serenity and this calm that I'd never felt before. And that was just a taste, right? It was like, oh my gosh, what is that? I want more of that. So I started digging into various books. I was reading things that was informing my understanding of meditation. And then I came across the book that probably opened me up the most, which is called The Untethered Soul by Michael A. Singer. And in the book, Michael A. Singer talks about the idea that, and it was novel for me at the time, that I am not my thoughts, that the thoughts that I have are actually something I can observe from a third person perspective or fourth person perspective, if you will. And I can actually build a relationship with those thoughts that's actually healthy and can create that opportunity for ease and comfort more often. And so that just set me on this long journey. I'm 34 years old now, 17 years of meditation, and I've done a variety of trainings. I've trained under Jack Kornfield and Tara Brach by way of Sounds True, and it was a 2-year program. Thomas Davis IV is one of my mentors. He's also this incredible mindfulness teacher who lives in the LA area, and it's just become a core part of my life. As far as breathwork goes, I was introduced to that, that might have been 6 years ago, just about. And so I was 28 at the time, and I was actually a resident at a trauma treatment facility. And I mentioned that I was navigating depression at 17. I realized over time that I also had undiagnosed post-traumatic stress disorder. And the combination of, a variety of factors led me to take a leave of absence from work when I was 28 years old and check myself into this facility. And it was in this facility that I was introduced to breath work. And the first time I experienced breath work, it was just revolutionary. I was just like experiencing things of my childhood, rewriting the narratives that I had been holding on to so tightly for almost 30 years at this point. And I felt like I had released and cleared 30 years of trauma. Honestly, I joke and say like I just did, 30 years of therapy in a 1 hour breathwork session. And that was the beginning of my journey of exploring what is breath work. What does it actually mean? What does it look like? What are the various types of breath work? Can I use breath work in a less of a cathartic sense, but more of a performance sense? And so I got certified in breath work. I started doing peak performance certification trainings. I started exploring all the various ways in which I can incorporate breath work into the modern world. And now, again, it's one of those core pillars of my life, mindfulness and breath work. They're very key to me in my everyday living.
Awesome. So I find a lot of things that you just said interesting. But you've done like a lot of exercise and athletics, and of course there's kind of a therapeutic aspect to those things, I think, for most people. But it seems like for you, breath work is, and meditation as well, but those are like really different. And what do you think makes, maybe this is going to be different for each, but what do you think makes breath work so valuable for our mental health?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, the control or the modulation of breath is definitely key from an athletics perspective. And I didn't know it at the time, but yeah, coaches would teach me different types of breathing practices to like calm my body down if I'm tired or to find more energy, etc. But I think the reason why breath work is so impactful for my mental health is that it gets out of, for me, it gets out of the mental body, right? I'm not thinking about the thing that I'm trying to solve. I'm not thinking about the experience I had in childhood. I'm not thinking about that challenging relationship I had with my wife. I'm not thinking about the stress and overwhelm I'm experiencing in my business. I'm just breathing. And in doing so, I move from my mental body and I move into my physical body. And that's that mind body connection that we all have. And in that process, what I'm doing is I'm effectively, uh, I like to think of it as like defragging the nervous system. I'm hitting like a hard reset on my nervous system to shake out all of the things that I may be holding on to. Because the truth is, Brady, and you know this, like every moment of every day, we're inputting information, we're taking in information, and that information is stored in our cells. The issues are in the tissues, quite literally. And so breath work is something that helps me with releasing those issues that I'm carrying in my tissues without having to know what it is or know why it is, but it just is, and I can let it go through the breath.
Yeah. So you started to touch on kind of the effect it has on our nervous system. Maybe you can go into that just a little bit more.
Yeah, happy to. So there are a whole host of theories as it relates to the nervous system. It's evolved a lot over time, our understanding of our nervous system. But what I like to play with when I'm thinking about breath work and what I've been taught and what I've come to understand for myself and with my clients is that is the parasympathetic and sympathetic response that we have, right? And so our nervous system, it usually operates in one of two types of expressions, if you will, where the parasympathetic response is rest and digest. I'm relaxed. I'm feeling good. I'm not feeling under threat, right? Rest and digest, meaning that I'm eating, I'm drinking, my digestive system is working properly. I'm able to move things through my body. And then there's a sympathetic response, which is actually I'm under threat, right? And the sympathetic response is usually associated with the fight, flight, or freeze response. There's another fourth one that I like to also bring in, which is fawn, right? And fawning is when, in the natural world, a fawn, like a deer, will literally call out for its mother or its group of other deer that it's with to get attention, right? So that's what fawn is. So flight, I run away. Fight, I stand and I fight and I protect myself. Freeze is I can't do anything and I'm paralyzed in the moment. And fawn is I'm yelling for help. I'm asking for somebody to help me. And so as we go through our day, our nervous system is fluctuating depending on the type of stimuli that it's taking in. So if I am focused on something that's in front of me, it's actually helpful to have somewhat of a sympathetic response, right? It's called eustress. It's good stress. It's the kind of stress that helps me actually execute on my goals. That's that motivation that I feel when I have a deadline. Those things are actually healthy for us. But too much of that stress, chronic stress, actually leads to getting stuck in that sympathetic response, right? And so what breath work does is it actually modulates the nervous system and typically moves us from that sympathetic response into that parasympathetic response. And the way we do that is by actually exciting the sympathetic response to release whatever emotional charge we're carrying as a result of whatever the stimuli is that we have in our body. So if it's anger, if it's sadness, if it's fear, if it's guilt, if it's shame, whatever it is, we release that through typically some kind of emotional expression of, laughter or yelling or crying, right? That's usually what I find myself doing. And then once I have come to completion, because once we come to completion in our emotions, right, they last usually about 90 seconds if we let ourselves feel them fully. They come to completion, and then our nervous system gradually shifts into that parasympathetic state again, where I can be in that rest and digest, where I can receive stimuli without feeling under threat, where I can be present with Brady on this call and not feel like I'm trying to figure a bunch of things out, right? I'm just present, I'm engaged, and I'm appreciating the opportunity in front of me.
Yeah, amazing. So you said something just at the end there that I think we should emphasize, because I don't think we emphasize it enough. But you talked about the fact that an emotion lasts just 90 seconds. And I think that's something that we kind of gloss over, at least in conversations that I often have. I kind of gloss over it a lot. But you also said another point after that, which is like, if you allow yourself to feel it. And I think a lot of the mental health challenges that we have in general are a byproduct of us not allowing ourselves to feel emotions, whether it's, pain or disgust or whatever it is. So I'm glad you mentioned that point. And so these emotions do kind of have generally a shelf life of 90 seconds. And you mentioned those ways to kind of get them out.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's an analogy that I like to use with breath work. So, if we don't allow ourselves to feel the emotion, what ends up happening is we store that emotional charge in our nervous system, right? And that's what things like post-traumatic stress disorder, that's how PTSD becomes something. So for me, I experienced traumatic moments in my childhood. I didn't understand how to process them properly. I bottled them up. I tried to navigate it. I adapted accordingly in order to survive that moment. But what ended up happening is that I had stored within me, right? And sometimes it shows up as like physical expressions. I think it's Peter Levine actually has this really wonderful video where he's working with a military veteran who experienced the detonation of a bomb, and he was in that bomb, and everyone around him lost their lives, and he survived. But he had this really profound tick where he would do this over and over again, and he didn't have it prior to that experience. And so what Peter Levine came to understand is that in his the expression of his PTSD was actually rooted in the fact that his body kept reacting to that bomb exploding over and over and over again. And so his neurons and the muscle fibers were firing in such a way to protect him any moment that he felt like he was under threat, because that's what we store. That's what he stored in his body as an example of a moment where, if I'm under threat, this is what's going to help me, right? And so when we don't express our emotions, they become stored energy, which then shows up like physical expressions, mental patterns, behavioral patterns, et cetera, et cetera. And what breathwork has done for me, and what I've seen for other people, is that it helps the natural flow of those emotions, right? 90 seconds of an emotion. If we feel it fully, we release it. That natural flow of emotions is how we're born. Babies cry and then they're done. All of a sudden they're happy again, right? But over time, we learn these behaviors that tell us that we shouldn't cry for whatever reason. We experience trauma or something happens that keeps us from being able to express ourselves fully and authentically. And as we do that, that natural flowing river of emotion starts to get debris. Right? There's maybe some leaves that fall into that river. Maybe there's a rock that falls into that river. Maybe there's a log. Maybe you experience some intense trauma and there's a boulder that falls into that river. And so those emotions will flow around, right? They'll flow around those various debris that are in the river. But it definitely, like, we've seen it, right? Like the moss that grows around those logs or those rocks that are in a river, right? The water becomes toxic over time. And if we get enough of that debris, enough of those boulders, enough of those logs in the water, the flowing of our emotions, what happens is that emotional river stops flowing entirely. And what I have seen is that if people don't allow themselves to feel or express their anger, they're also struggling with feeling joy, right? They struggle with expressing that because their whole emotional river is no longer flowing. I think it's Khalil Gibran that says something like, allow sorrow to carve deep into your being because it makes more room for joy, right? It's just that captures, right, that idea of any emotion that we feel. It allows for us to feel the full gamut, the full capacity of our emotional reality. So what breathwork does is it brings a small tsunami, if you will, down that river to clear out that debris. And then the expression of the emotion, whether it's laughter, whether it's crying, whether it's anger, whatever it might be in that breathwork practice, is really the physicality or physicalization of the releasing of those boulders, of that debris, of those logs, if I will. And so
Yeah.
that's the analogy that I like to think about when it comes to breathwork.
Nice. Yeah, I really like that. I also like just going off of you saying how um, basically like allowing yourself to feel this influx and flow of emotions, and kind of being able to feel the negative emotions with the positive emotions kind of increases your capacity to go both ways. And it actually kind of on the same topic, speaking about meditation, it makes me think of um, some things that Andrew Huberman has said about kind of the effectiveness of meditation, with specifically with regards to focus, and that doing a meditation kind of puts you in this state where you're, for lack of a better word, so bored that you're like going down into this trough. He uses the word trough. And you have this trough of stimulation where like you're not stimulated at all. And so then when you come out of it after that meditation, you are basically more capable and easily excited or easily entertained by the things you're doing. And so maybe you can be more interested in doing something that previously seemed boring. Um, so let's talk a little bit more about meditation on that note. So, what are some of the different variations or different types of meditations that someone could
Mm,
do?
that's a great question, Brady. Because it is a very vast field of exploration, there are countless types of meditations. And the reality is that you can ask any, two different people, like, what is this type of meditation? And those one person will say one thing, and then another person will say something different. Um, so the way that I was trained in insight meditation specifically, which is a westernized version, secularized version of Vipassana meditation. And really what it is, it's a practice of noticing whatever is happening for you, the stimuli that's coming up for you, noticing without judgment, on purpose, the various stimuli, and not getting pulled away or distracted by it and forgetting your center, right? I believe it's uh, John Kabat-Zinn, his quote of what is meditation. He says exactly that. Meditation is paying attention on purpose without judgment. And so that's very similar to what I was taught, right? Which is that if I'm seated in meditation, what I am doing is I am creating or expanding my field of awareness to notice the various stimuli that I'm experiencing. And I start with the breath, right? So there's in Vipassana meditation and insight meditation, there are four foundations of mindfulness, right? The first one being mindfulness of the breath, right? Which is also related to mindfulness of the body, because I feel the breath in my body. So that's where I start. I start with noticing, right? What does it feel like to breathe? And then I move outward from there to my emotions, right? And the feelings and the sensations in my body, because that's what emotions are. They're actually sensations in the body that we then pass through our consciousness and then interpret according to our cultural and historical backgrounds. And then we move from there into mindfulness of the thoughts, right? What's going on in my mind? What's the top 10 greatest hits of the repeats that I keep playing back over and over again? And the fine one is actually mindfulness of mindfulness, right? It's the dhammas. It's how can I be aware of everything all at once? And so in each one of those foundations, there are different types of mindfulness practices or meditation practices that one could incorporate. And so just a few that I'll share with folks is, and one that I found to be really impactful for me that actually has shown to improve one's capacity for compassion is metta, or loving kindness meditation. So it's much more of an active form of meditation. There are some that are more passive and you're observing. This one's much more active. You're definitely repeating phrases over and over again. And these phrases, they are some version of this, right? May you be well. May you be free from suffering, right? And you move into different people starting with typically yourself, and then you move into someone that you love, and then you move into someone maybe you have a challenging relationship with, right? And then finally you move into the world at large, if you will. And that practice has actually been shown to improve or actually increase the size of the brain. I think it's part of the amygdala that actually has the capacity for compassion. So that's one really effective way just to be more aware of, compassionate, and empathetic to the world at large. Another one that's really effective and one that I practice on a daily basis is just the practice of noting. So as I'm seated in meditation, I'm noticing the various stimuli. And I think of it like clouds passing in the sky, right? I notice the cloud. Oh, that looks like a bunny rabbit. And then I let it float away, right? I notice the cloud. Oh my gosh, that's a turtle. And then I let it flow away. And then as it goes away, what I'm doing is I'm coming back into present awareness, typically of my breath or some kind of physical sensation, right? There's also transcendental meditation. That's something that I don't necessarily practice, but it's a repeat of a mantra over and over again.
So going off of those, I mean, I think first of all, the loving kindness meditation, I can think about the first time that I did that. Actually, we were working together at the time, and it was a company meeting, and someone had been leading the guided meditation for the company, oddly enough. Maybe for some people that's odd, but for us, it was reality. So anyway, I remember, engaging in this meditation, and I was working from home, and it was the first time doing this. And I started to get really emotional, and I started just to silently cry. And my wife came home in the middle of it, and she was like, "What's going on in your work meeting?" So it was a very effective, affective meditation for me that I hadn't done before. And, I just kind of went into it being willing to do something new. And, I could basically instantly see the effect that it had on me. And then the other one is kind of becoming the observer of your own thoughts. And before I had tried that, it didn't really seem real to me, or it just didn't really make sense. And so once I, again, just kind of went for it and, followed along, played along, whatever words you want to use for it, I started to get that. And when you said notice a cloud that it's shaped like a bunny or whatever, it sounds silly if you haven't done it before, but being able to get into that state where you can notice your own thoughts, the first time, for me, it feels like magic. It's this is kind of cool. I can notice these thoughts, and I don't have to attach to them. And, it's harder for more emotionally charged thoughts or, more emotive thoughts, I guess, at times. But being able to get in that state, at least as a proof of concept, and trying that out for the first time, where you notice something, but then you come back and you're ready to notice the next thing. I think, I can't describe it any other way besides just kind of the first time it feels like magic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man. I agree 100%. I think the when I started meditating in my dorm my freshman year of college, and I struggled a lot. And I remember just being like, why do people do this? This feels really uncomfortable. I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm actually getting frustrated. This doesn't feel calming at all. Someone told me this was going to make me calm. This is not working for me. And I think that for folks who are beginning mindfulness or meditation for the first time, to know that that's actually part of the journey, right? Part of the journey is the struggle. It is I'm not sure how this is working, whether it's working, what am I doing? But it's the noticing of the struggle. When you feel frustrated, notice when you feel frustrated, right? When you're questioning whether or not this is working, notice that. When you're saying this is not working, notice that, right? And it becomes this interesting kind of meta. It is in a lot of ways, it's metacognition. You're just watching yourself react to various things while you're in the meditation practice. And then what happens is you realize, oh wait, I'm noticing that I'm noticing my thoughts. And then you notice that you just noticed your thoughts, because that becomes another thought, right? And so it becomes a game in a lot of ways. And at some point, folks typically find themselves, I know I found myself there, and folks that I teach have also come there where they're like, I don't have any thoughts anymore. And then I'm like, well, that's a thought. The fact that you're thinking you don't have thoughts anymore is actually a thought. And they're like, oh, you're right. Yeah. And so that it just becomes a game, right? Because ultimately thoughts are the most natural thing. It's like saliva for the brain, right? Saliva for our mind. We're just excreting them all the time. They're not good, they're not bad. It's just a matter of how do we relate to them. And that's the whole point of meditation. How do we change our relationship with our internal world so that it doesn't feel like something that is driving our behavior unconsciously, but we can actually use our thinking mind as a tool, right, to help us make decisions. And you brought up something, Brady. I'm going back a ways. You said something about focus, right? About how Andrew Huberman talks about focus being a byproduct of meditation. And the way I think about it is, it's like training. It's training your brain. It's training your mind to be able to notice when it gets distracted, and then to come back to something. And it's the same thing when we go to the gym or we go for a run or whatever it is. Like, with more practice, we get stronger, we get better at it. And that process of noticing, oh, I got distracted, let me come back to that breath, or whatever the single mantra is, whatever it is that's keeping me in the present moment, it's building that focus muscle, so that when I'm not meditating, I notice, oh, I got distracted, I picked up my cell phone, or oh, I need to be working on this thing that's in front of me, not worrying about what's for dinner, or whatever it might be, right? We build that muscle of coming back to the present moment over and over again.
Yeah, and I think that we've started to touch on some misconceptions of meditation and breath work both. But I think that's one of the big ones is like some people are like, I just can't sit there and not think about anything. Like you touched on going to the gym and the way that you get stronger is by like literally tearing your muscles. So like actually you have to fail in order to get stronger. And that kind of concept goes to just almost everything. But meditation is just an extension of that. And you mentioned like coming back to your breath or coming back to whatever it is that the meditation is on. That is the practice. And so going off of that as one of probably the biggest misconceptions, at least that comes to my mind, can you think of other kind of misconceptions or myths or things that people just kind of get wrong about meditation?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a big one for sure. I think some of the ones that are most prominent are, I have to be seated in some kind of, lotus, or, half lotus, full lotus, with your feet folded and, on top of your legs. Um, that you have to be some kind of monk, or, spiritual person or religious person to practice meditation or mindfulness. That it is, a religion, and that people are indoctrinating you into a religion of some kind if you practice meditation. Um, that it's actually a waste of time. Sitting and doing nothing is a waste of time. I hear that a lot. A lot of people who are especially high performing, high achieving, the idea of sitting and doing nothing for a period of time feels like it's actually wasting time. But the reality is that it's actually giving you the ability to be more productive, more effective when you get back to whatever it was that you're doing before. But those are probably some of the biggest ones that I hear. I've had my mother actually ask me, and like, is that like a new religion for you now? Like, is that like, no, mom, that's not necessarily it. So it's definitely natural and normal to question those things, to wonder, right? But honestly, the way that I've come to appreciate it is that it's a practice of building a relationship with yourself. That's really what it is, to become aware of yourself in a way that allows for you to be in tune with, appreciative of, and no longer unconsciously moved by, right, things that happen underneath the surface of what we see in the mirror every day.
Yeah. Yeah. And you touched on basically like people kind of putting meditation in this box and vice versa, saying like, if I'm going to meditate, then I have to be in this kind of box. And you don't have to be anything. You can you can meditate and you can still be who you are, or you can change who you are, or you can change what meditation is. You know, you can come up with your own meditations. You can kind of just make it your own. So yeah, I really like those thoughts about misconceptions. So to close out, I guess before we get to my last question, is there anything that we've talked about that you want to come back to, or you think would be important for people to know or understand?
Yeah. I think broadening the idea of meditation is really important. Um, because I know we've talked about like loving kindness and watching your thoughts, and like these are types of meditations that are traditionally done like sitting down. But you can meditate while washing the dishes, right? Just notice what it feels like in your hands to have water running over your hands, what it's like to feel the suds of the soap, what it feels like as you're scrubbing the dish. Like that is a meditative practice. Going for a walk without your cell phone and just paying attention to the sounds that you hear as you're walking around your neighborhood is a form of meditation, right? There are meditations that are actually walking meditations where you walk exceptionally slow and you notice the contact of your foot hitting the floor beneath you, the rolling of your foot from the heel to the ball, the tips of the toes coming off the ground, shifting your weight over to the other foot, having the other foot hit the ground, right? That's a meditative practice. You know, you don't have to get to that degree, right? That's just a form of meditation. But if you just walk outside without some distractions and pay attention to what you're hearing, what you're seeing, you are practicing meditation. You're practicing the act of being mindful of your surroundings, free of judgment, right? Just taking it all in. So
Nice.
my encouragement for folks is just think about it differently, right? Consider how you can just pay attention more intentionally with your family, with your friends, with your work, when you're outside. And the thing that's typically the most distracting from the present moment is this thing, right? Can we put it down long enough, right? Just to be present with whatever's in front of us. And the benefit of that is less stress. Truly, we feel less wound up, less in that sympathetic response, more presence with our family, with our friends, more effective in our roles. And the most important thing, at least in my opinion, is deeper connections and relationships with the people that matter most to us.
Nice. Cool. So for someone that's listening and they're like, this is it. I'm going to start. I'm going to meditate now for the first time, or maybe even someone that wants to kind of, just practice, deepen their practice. Do you have some small tips for how to get started into meditation and potentially breath work as well?
Yeah. The biggest thing that I can share, I'll share for both of them. The biggest thing I can share about mindfulness or any new practice is start small. If it's brand new to you, you've never done it before, set a timer, do it for 60 seconds. We have 60 seconds for sure. And once we start with those 60 seconds, we just become curious. There's no good or bad, whether it worked or not. Become curious about that experience for you, right? Notice what it felt like. Notice how you felt compared to the moment before you did the practice and just explore it, right? And so, one small way you can get started is literally sit down, you know, if you're in the middle of a work week and you're in the middle of a meeting and you're looking at your clock and you're saying, okay, this meeting's going to end in 10 minutes. My next meeting starts 5 minutes after that. I'm going to move away from my screen. I'm going to set a timer. I'm going to sit on my couch. I've got a couch over here. I'm going to sit on my couch for 60 seconds. And I'm going to do nothing other than just notice what's happening. The sounds that I hear, right? The smells that I smell in the room, the feeling of my breathing, right? The belly expanding and contracting, just noticing that for 60 seconds. And if you practice that a few times a week, you may start to be more curious about, well, what if I take this a little further, right? What if I do it for 2 minutes instead of 1 minute? And just keep playing with it until it feels like something that you actually enjoy exploring, because that's the point. The point is to enjoy the exploration, even when it's uncomfortable, right?
Yeah, I'm going to cut you off there
Yes,
because
please.
I've, I've in one of our previous episodes with Hassan, we talked about basically like how going out of a meeting at work, and this is for people who are working from home or kind of in desk jobs, but coming out of a meeting, we feel stressed sometimes. And both this conversation and that one kind of opened my eyes because I don't think of myself as a stressed person, but um, when I finish a meeting, I check ESPN.com. It's like
Mm.
that's like my ritual, and I don't want to, but I've like come to this awareness that this is because of the stress of being on a call, seeing my face and knowing that other people are seeing my face, being judged about what I'm saying, stuff like that. And so this transition time is something that I've started to pay attention to a bit more. And you giving this 60-second practice and the idea to kind of use this as an opportunity to observe, I think that's going to be really helpful for me. Hopefully other people will find it helpful as well. But like just using 60 seconds right then, that's a moment when, for me, I'm in like a heightened state and I often don't notice it. So I'm really gonna try to do that. And I'll let you, if you're gonna go into breath work or something else, then I'll let you jump in there.
Yeah, definitely. Let me know how it goes, Brady. I'm excited.
Yeah.
I'm excited
Yeah.
to hear. Um, there's a whole nother conversation around like the flywheel of flow is actually like you got to build the stress and then you got to release the stress intentionally and then you experience flow and you just do that cycle over and over again. Maybe for a future conversation.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the breath work, the thing that I have come to appreciate about breath work, it's similar to mindfulness, is you can habit stack, right? So one thing that I've started doing is in the morning, I brush my teeth every day without fail, right? One thing I can do while I'm brushing my teeth is I can just put my hand on my belly and just breathe deeply as I'm brushing my teeth, right? And that's a form of breath work. Breath work is simply paying attention to my breath, right? Paying attention to my breath, noticing what it feels like, and breathing deeply. Wonderful way to just become familiar with that practice of intentional breathing. A second thing that I started doing years ago that I share with people is that anytime I walk through a door frame, I check in with my breath, right? So my office door here, my front door for my house, walking through the door frame at the grocery store, I just check in with my breath. Okay, how am I breathing? Is it shallow in my chest? Am I breathing fast? Or is it deep and resonant? Am I breathing slowly in my belly? And just noticing that begins to build that relationship with our breath, which allows for us to start thinking about, well, what happens if I breathe more deeply and I hold my breath for a period of time and then I release it, right? Like then we begin to play with it. So that's one thing just to get started with the idea. One practice you can do that I think anyone and everyone should do is the 5-5-5. It's called a heart coherence breath. And it's actually popularized by an organization here in Santa Cruz County called Heart Math. And they actually have biometrics devices that you can measure how your body responds to this. There's HRV measurement, a whole host of different things that are there that come with that. But you can do it without the actual devices. And it's simply 5 seconds in through the nose, 5 seconds out through the nose. And if you do that for 5 minutes, what happens is your various systems in your body will cohere. Your endocrine system, your vascular system, your cardiovascular system, your respiratory system, your nervous system all starts to cohere because you're breathing in this equal in breath, out breath. And so your body starts to regulate itself with that balance. And there's a book by James Nestor called Breath, the New Science of a Lost Art, where he discovers that across various traditions, various practices, there's a sweet spot for the amount of in breath and out breath. It's like 5 seconds, 5 point something seconds. And if you can get that resonance of 5 point something seconds in, 5 point something seconds out, your body naturally experiences euphoria. And euphoria is a way good way to live your life. That's a good feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Oh, that's so cool. I'll have to try that.
Mhm.
So now actually, can we take like 1 minute? Can you guide me and everyone listening in like a 1 minute meditation just so we can jump in?
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay.
Happy to. So just taking a second to get comfortable. If you're seated, finding a posture that feels upright, dignified yet relaxed. If you're walking, just pay attention to what it feels like to be walking. If you're driving, please keep your eyes open and just pay attention to your posture in the driver's seat. And we're going to begin with 3 deep breaths, taking a big, deep inhale through the nose and sighing it out through the mouth. Really using that diaphragm to get all the air out. Good. 2 more of those in through the nose. Sighing it out. Good. Last one in through the nose. and sighing it out. Just noticing how you feel as you breathe in and out through the nose, naturally finding a natural rhythm of breath again. And what I want to encourage you to do is actually become curious about the sounds that you're hearing. If you have headphones on, maybe you're noticing the whirring of technology. Maybe you're hearing the timbre of my voice and the way that my voice cracks as I speak. Maybe you're outside and you can hear birds chirping or cars driving by. Maybe the wind rustling through the trees. But just notice what sounds you hear. And if it's helpful, you might even begin to apply a label to those sounds. Ah, that's a truck, or a bird. Oh, Jaleel's voice. And through that, what you are doing is you're actually, I like to jokingly call it triangulating the present moment. You're noticing what's happening around you in the present moment, moving yourself, removing your focus and attention outside of your head and into what's actually happening right here and right now. And at any moment of the day, you can do this with or without the 3 breaths. And if your eyes are closed, go ahead and open them and come back to whatever's in front of you.
Nice. Awesome. Well, thank you. For me, that was a different experience doing it on camera, but it was very interesting to notice even the feelings and the emotions I had and trying to get into it and just kind of let those things go. And again, trying to observe those things. So yeah, that was really cool for me.
Thanks for sharing your experience, Brady. Appreciate that.
Yeah. So, we talked about a lot of interesting things today, breath work, meditation, kind of the effects those can have on us. And then just some practical tips on getting into them and really just like the benefits of noticing and not judging and kind of making this practice your own. I learned a ton from you, Jaleel, and I'm really looking forward to putting these things into practice. So I appreciate you coming on and taking the time.
You, brother. Appreciate you too. Thanks for having me on. And yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing about these practices and how they impact your life. And everyone who's listening, enjoy.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of The Adaptive Mind, brought to you by Nurture, the research-based app for overcoming unwanted or addictive behaviors. I hope you found our conversation insightful and inspiring. If you did, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback helps us reach more listeners and continue bringing these learnings to people that need them. Remember that you have an adaptive mind that does incredible things every day, and it's capable of even more. We'll see you in the next episode.